Hello students, today we are going to learn the mechanism of breathing or the mechanism of pulmonary ventilation. So let us know what is the entire process. So this pulmonary ventilation involves two phenomena. First one is inhalation and next one is exhalation. So what is inhalation? Inhalation means to take the oxygen inside the body. So inhalation means to taking out the fresh air or oxygen inside the body. So this is known as inhalation or inspiration, taking the fresh air or oxygen inside the body. Next one is exhalation or expiration, means to release out CO2 or used air from the body to the external air, means to release out CO2. In simple sense, release out CO2 is known as exhalation or expiration, and to take this oxygen is known as inhalation or inspiration. I am taking the line again, I am repeating it. So taking the fresh air or taking the oxygen from the environment to inside this body, inside the lung, is known as inhalation or inspiration, taking out the fresh air or oxygen from the environment inside the body. Inhalation, inspiration, right? Next is exhalation or expiration, means to release out CO2 from the body to the external air, is known as exhalation or expiration. Understand? Now, what is the entire mechanism of inspiration or expiration? First, I have drawn a diagram over there. See, this is a diagram of the thoracic cavity. Okay, and this thoracic cavity, this side is the ventral side. See, if we consider this thoracic cavity of a human being, then the ventral part of this human being is in that side. See, this is the ventral side. Okay, and in the ventral side of the thoracic cavity, what we have ribs and sternum, and in the back of this thoracic cavity, the person having backbone. Okay, and this is the dorsal side. Okay, this is the dorsal side of the human of this thoracic cavity, and this is ventral side. Okay, and this is the ventral side of our body, and this is the dorsal side of the body where the backbones are situated. So in this thoracic cavity, I have drawn this diagram very roughly, and this is ventral part and this is the dorsal part, and in the ventral part ribs are there, sternum is there, and in the dorsal part backbone is there. Okay, and this is this thoracic cavity, and this is diaphragm. This line is known as diaphragm. This is a membrane. Okay, this is a membrane. Okay, now what is diaphragm? Diaphragm, that is a membrane that separates thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity. Understand? Diaphragm is a membrane that separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity, because thoracic cavity having some important organs like lung and the heart, and abdominal cavity is also having some important organs like digestive organs, like excretory organs like kidney and all. So it needs to be separated. Okay, and that is why diaphragm is there. Diaphragm separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity. Now what is the function of diaphragm during this breathing? So first one is diaphragm having some muscle associated with it. Diaphragm having some muscle associated with it, and the function of those muscles is to hold the diaphragm in its position. Understand? There are a number of muscles present in the diaphragm, like radial muscles and the phrenic muscle. What is the function of those muscles? The function of those muscles is to hold this diaphragm in the position. Okay, now when the muscle contract, okay, when the muscle contract, like the contraction of radial and phrenic muscle of the diaphragm causes what? If these associated muscles of the diaphragm start contracting, then what happens? Then the diaphragm goes downward. Understand? If the associated muscles of the diaphragm named radial muscles and the phrenic muscles start contracting, then the diaphragm goes downward. Understand? These muscles contract and diaphragm goes downward. Understand? And if the diaphragm goes downward, then the thoracic cavity enlarges. Okay. this is the function of diaphragm in the breathing. During the breathing, diaphragm goes downward, as because this contraction of muscle of radial and phrenic muscles happen, that is why diaphragm goes downward. And when the diaphragm goes downward, thoracic cavity enlarges. And when the diaphragm goes downward, what happens? The abdominal cavity contract, abdominal cavity gets it get down from its normal volume, and the relaxation of the abdominal muscle occur. What happened? Actually, this abdominal muscles of in this phenomena, abdominal muscle act as a passive regulator of breathing mechanism, or what they do, the abdominal muscle relaxes, okay, and that allows the compression of the abdominal organ, an abdominal organ that compresses during the inhalation process, understand? And the diaphragm goes downward, that increase the or enlarges the thoracic cavity and decrease the abdominal cavity. And when this abdominal cavity decreases in volume, the compression of the abdominal organ happen. This is the thing occur. Now what happened? This ribs and sternum muscles, or sternum is associated with some other muscles like the external intercostal muscle. So what is the function of external intercostal muscle? External intercostal muscle that pull the sternum and the rib outward and upward. That muscle, external intercostal muscle, pull these ribs and sternum upward and outward. That also causes enlargement of the thoracic cavity, understand? So the external intercostal muscle helps to pull the ribs and the sternum outward and upward, and that is also a reason, that is why thoracic cavity enlarges in size. Okay, so by this two phenomena, and as because the diaphragm goes downward and ribs and the sternum goes upward and the outward, that is why the thoracic cavity get the bigger space. Now what happen? If the volume of a certain space get enlarged, then according to physics, something like Boyle's law, this pressure get down. Okay, if the volume increases, then pressures get down. That is happen inside the thoracic cavity. What happen? This structure, this spaces inside this thoracic cavity enlarges, volume increased, and its pressure inside this thoracic cavity decreased, and that is why the external pressure is normal, and that is why the external air that started going inside the lung or through the or inside this thoracic cavity. Okay, so what happened? If this pressure inside this thoracic cavity getting down and the outer pressure is normal, that is why the air from the outside start getting inside this thoracic cavity, understand? And that is why the air start coming inside the body through this pathway, from environment to nasal chamber, next to pharynx to glottis, then larynx to trachea. And trachea is the junction by which this air start getting inside this lung, first to the bronchi, then to bronchiole, then to alveoli. And here in the alveoli, gaseous exchange takes place. Gaseous exchange takes place means here the oxygen is going to mix with the hemoglobin, and CO2 released out from the hemoglobin, and after this gaseous exchange takes place, CO2 comes to the alveolar membrane and go back to this pathway and released out to the environment. So in the first half of this mechanism, we have learnt about the mechanism of inhalation or inspiration. Okay, so this was the mechanism of inhalation or inspiration. So now this air or the fresh air or the oxygen getting inside this lung or through this pathway from environment to nasal chamber, then pharynx to glottis, larynx, trachea, then bronchi, bronchiole, and to alveoli. Okay, now what happened? Now after the gaseous exchange takes place, this CO2 needs to be released out, okay, and this phenomena of releasing of CO2 is known as exhalation or expiration. See, this is exhalation or expiration, release of CO2 released out from the body, mechanism by which the CO2 released out from the body to the environment is known as exhalation. Now this phenomena will start. At the first, what happened? Diaphragm goes upward. Why? Because this reverse phenomena start occurring. What happened in this inhalation process? Start reversing. Here the contraction of radial and phrenic muscle occur. Here the relaxation of phrenic and radial muscles occur. That is why the muscle associated with the diaphragm, like the radial muscles and the phrenic muscles, start relaxing. And when this muscle, see, this muscle start relaxing, that is why the diaphragm go back in its original position. What is, see in this diagram only, the diaphragm got flattened during inhalation. Here diaphragm go back to its original position. Okay, and when the diaphragm go back to its original position, see, the thoracic cavity get back into its original position, which was smaller than before. And next, what happened? Contraction of external internal muscle occurred during the inhalation. Here what happened? Relaxation of external intercostal muscle. As the external intercostal muscle relaxes, then ribs and the sternum get back. Okay, that is why this thoracic cavity becomes dorsoventrally flattened, and the volume of thoracic cavity decreases. And when the volume of the thoracic cavity decreases, the pressure increases, the inside pressure increases, and the external pressure is same. And whereas the volume of this thoracic cavity decreases, so the pressure increases and the pressure outside is same. That is why this CO2 present inside this thoracic cavity or present inside this lung, that this inside pressure that pulls it backward, like the CO2 that goes back in this reverse pathway from alveoli to bronchiole, then bronchiole to trachea, then trachea to larynx, then glottis to pharynx, then nasal chamber to external air. This is the reverse mechanism. So inhalation and exhalation is a reverse mechanism. Okay, sometimes in your board examination this mechanism is being asked, or the difference between inspiration and expiration, this question is being asked, and this diagram is very important. If in your board examination this question is asked, like write the mechanism of breathing, write the mechanism of pulmonary ventilation, then you have to write this. Okay, you have to draw the diagram and you have to explain it too. Hope this video is helpful to you and the entire mechanism you got understood. Thank you.